They were living a hot tub lifestyle. They were living it up, while Arthur was forced to stand up against the wall for up to 16 hours a day.
From the moment Arthur was born, he filled my life with joy. He was always smiling and had the most inquisitive little mind. He had every costume and action figure and would spend hours dressing up and pretending he had all their superpowers. But if Arthur could ask for one final thing, it would be that he was remembered for his superpowers. And Arthur's superpower was his smile.
A suburban house of horrors.
There was a clear pattern that had developed of utter cruelty.
From the first moment of the cover-up
He threw himself on the floor, his headbutt in the floor.
to the final lie.
The last 6 months, he's battered both my kids, he's smashed this house to pieces.
The story of the little boy who broke Britain's heart.
Looking back at Arthur's short life, he never really stood a chance.
December 2021. And football crowds around Britain pay tribute to a young fan whose life came to a tragic and premature end. His name, Arthur Lambinjo-Hughes.
Arthur was a huge Birmingham City fan, and one of his favourite possessions was a Birmingham shirt, and he wore it whenever he could. So on the 6-minute mark of the game, they paused to clap for Arthur, and those 6 minutes represented 1 year of his life.
Arthur was born in 2014, only child of Thomas Hughes and Olivia Lambinjo-Hughes. 2 years later, the couple split whilst still in their 20s. Arthur stayed with Hughes in an annex of his parents' house in the Shirley district of Solihull. In August that year, he started dating Emma Tustin, a 30-year-old mother of 4 who lived 2 miles away. It was from her house, 10 months on, that she called 999.
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
Barely.
Okay, is he breathing right now though?
Is he breathing, Tom? He's taking big dark breaths. Basically, my 6-year-old stepson is falling, he's banged his head.
Okay.
And while he was on the floor, he's banged his head another 5 times.
Okay.
Emma Tustin refers to him using he 30 times.
He's in and out. He's got a big lump, but he's bandaged. He's barely breathing. His head is sick. He's losing. He's very pale. Bandaged his head. He's barely breathing. He's lost colour. He's basically been treating us all up. He's lost just at the minute.
Him 6 times.
I'm trying to pick him up in the process. He's washed him down to get him, doing him, but I've got him up.
His 6 times and himself 3 times.
His head, banged his head on his head.
No way.
Banged his head, the lump on his head. He's sat on his back. He's threw himself, he's done to himself. He's knocked himself up.
Within weeks of meeting Hughes, she became pregnant again, and the two announced plans to marry. As they began spending more and more time together, Arthur's behaviour underwent a dramatic change, noted by staff at his school.
It wasn't really taken as seriously as it should have been, bearing in mind that this is a child who has gone from actually being really quite stable to very, very unhappy in a short space of time.
Is he awake?
He's half in and out, but he's banged his head quite hard.
Is his breathing noisy or abnormal?
Is it noisy or abnormal? It's barely there, he's barely breathing, he's in and out. He's basically been treating us all up. He's threw himself on the floor, his headbutt in the floor. His headbutt in the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
That's a child in peril, and so it makes for difficult hearing.
How old is he?
He's 6, nearly 7.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's like very late.
He's very pale, but obviously it's a big bang. He's knocked himself out by the look of him.
And he's barely breathing now.
He's breathing, he's barely breathing. He's lost just at the minute.
Following Emma Tustin's 999 call, paramedics rushed Arthur to the intensive care unit at Birmingham Children's Hospital. As doctors assessed his injuries, she stayed behind to answer police questions, with Arthur's father leaving all the talking to her.
Just briefly, what happened?
Basically, he'd gone out to get me a birthday cake for kids. Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step. Arthur's put himself all over the floor. He's banged himself off the radiator. He's hit me, he's kicked me in the process of me trying to get him back on the thinking step. He's then gone on all 4s on the floor, and I've told him to get up. And I shut the door over, and all I heard was a crack off the floor. He was headbutting the floor on all 4s. He headbutted the floor once, said, "Arthur, get up, you're going to hurt yourself. I've phoned your dad." He went, "I don't care." At that point, he was fine. And then he dropped his head again as I've tried to bear hug him and pick him up, and he headbutted the floor 3 times.
Thomas Hughes was 27 and had worked as a plasterer, builder's labourer and amateur football coach. According to friends and family, he'd doted on Arthur for the first 5 years of his life. From the start of his relationship with Tustin, Hughes had allowed her to set rules for his son and to decide the punishments when he broke them.
A growing dislike for the boy was evident, and it was evident in a very short space of time.
In March 2020, when England went into its first national COVID lockdown, Hughes moved in to Tustin's home permanently, taking his young son with him. Over the next few months, her dislike of Arthur increased further.
Olivia, Arthur's natural mother, had recently applied through the courts to resume contact with Arthur, and I think that Emma Tustin probably thought that that would obviously bring Hughes back into contact with Olivia too, and she saw that as a real threat.
Just briefly, what happened?
Basically, he'd gone out to get me a birthday cake for the kids. Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step.
So Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step, and we're supposed to associate that with the fact that he's probably been naughty, and that's why he's got to go on the thinking step. And then she tells us Arthur's thrown himself all over the floor.
Arthur's thrown himself all over the floor, he's banged himself off the radiator, he's hit me, he's kicked me in the process of me trying to get him back on the thinking step. At that point, he was fine. And then he dropped his head again as I've tried to bear hug him and pick him up, and he headbutted the floor 3 times.
Here on this
Yeah, round about, the door was shut, so if you go in, I'll show you. Because it's probably about here his head was, but it's concrete, there's no underlay under that. But he'd banged his head 3 or 4 times. Obviously, then went to picked him up. He'd knocked himself unconscious. I picked him up, put him on the sofa, poured water in his mouth.
So you come in, he's banged his head 3 or 4 times here.
I was in the kitchen, then I'd sat down in the living room and that's when he threw himself on the floor.
Then you heard him banging his head. So what did you do?
Concerns about Arthur's welfare had been voiced repeatedly in the months before the 999 call. There were worries about how he was being treated, not only by Tustin, but by his own dad.
Is becoming far more strict with Arthur. He's far more punitive with him, and often he's doing it at the behest of Tustin. So she is telling him that he needs to be stricter, that he needs to deal with this kind of behaviour in a certain kind of way, and he's going along with that. So this is a real change in the man. What he's getting is brutality, harshness, punishment.
She tended to disparage Arthur, to treat him cruelly, to punish him, to insult him a lot. And that was what was really clearly giving people concerns.
In April 2019, Arthur's paternal grandmother noticed marks on his body and asked the local social services department to investigate. The social services team accepted the explanation and the assurances that Arthur was being well cared for. They concluded there were no safeguarding concerns, but they'd been duped.
When the social workers came round, they saw Arthur happily playing in the paddling pool. What they didn't know was that was one of the few times that he was actually allowed out of the house. And it meant that the picture that they got of Arthur had all been staged and manipulated by Arthur's dad and his girlfriend. Now, we know at the time social services were under a huge amount of pressure, the country was in lockdown, they were facing more calls than ever before, but this wasn't their finest hour.
June the 17th, 2020. Around 10 hours after Arthur's admission to hospital, doctors withdrew the 6-year-old's life support. As well as the recent catastrophic brain trauma, they found 130 more unexplained injuries. The investigation into a supposed household accident was now a murder inquiry.
Then you heard him banging his head. So what did you do?
I came out to him and told him to get up. He told me no. So I tried to bear hug him and put my arms underneath him and pick him up. And he dropped and he banged his head another 3 times off the floor.
So he's unresponsive?
Yeah.
In the weeks before his death, Arthur's health and appearance deteriorated. When one of his uncles voiced his concerns to the police, they took no action, as they believed social services were already investigating. Due to the pandemic, Arthur's teachers had also been unable to keep tabs on his welfare. Even when his school reopened a week before the 999 call, his father and Tustin wouldn't allow him to return.
Domestic violence of all types really skyrocketed during lockdown, and you know what they say, domestic abusers always work from home. But can we blame lockdown? No, I don't think we can blame lockdown. This would have happened, I think, anyway. I think that lockdown just made the situation more intense, so made it happen that bit more quickly.
Towards the end of her police interview, Tustin began talking about Arthur's behaviour throughout lockdown, and for the first time appeared to become emotional.
Like I say, he's like the last 6 months, he's battered both my kids, he's smashed this house to pieces, he's battered his dad, he's hit me. He's hit me. When I tried to get him off the floor from headbutting the floor, he headbutted me and he kicked me and he's hit me. Yesterday we went to my friend's house and he pushed me down 5 stairs. You're not my real mum, I hate you. I'm gonna get my mum to kill you, he said.
But that seems to be the trigger which has caused this anger to escalate to a position where she's just leaking fury.
You're not my real mum, I hate you.
She looks feral in this image here, where the brows are down. You can see the vertical wrinkles between the brows. You can see the glare of the eyes. And this is almost disgust combined with anger. And this is hate.
I'm gonna get my mum to kill you, he said. And even so, I've done my best for that kid. It's me.
A man and a woman are being questioned following the death of a 6-year-old boy in the West Midlands. Arthur Lambinjo-Hughes succumbed to what doctors have described as an unsurvivable brain injury following an incident at his home in Solihull.
Detectives identified Tustin and Hughes as the perpetrators within hours.
When West Midlands police officers took their mobile phones off them, that's really where the case was pretty much decided there and then. But there was so much evidence on those phones, text messages between the two, detailing Arthur's punishments, but also clear pattern that had developed during those month or so during lockdown of utter cruelty.
The texts showed Tustin blaming Arthur for causing arguments in the house and complaining about having to look after him. In one exchange, she threatened to split with Hughes if Arthur stayed. The couple patched up their row, and soon Hughes was mimicking and even encouraging her abuse of his son.
When you hear some of the language that they used about Arthur, it's really heartbreaking and disturbing. Tustin describes him as Satan and Hitler. She calls him the C word. And Hughes, instead of defending his son in his replies, he calls his son a weasel. And they seem to egg one another on. So she will say to Hughes the punishment that she's going to give to this poor little boy. And in response, he said things like, take his neck off or just finish him.
The big mystery is, how did Hughes turn from this actually concerned and good father into this dreadful, abusive, I don't even want to call him a father, who is encouraging his partner to end the life of his son? The fact is that Arthur had been demonised, and therefore he was deserving of violence. What they were calling Arthur is very, very significant. They were referring to him as the devil's child, Satan, Hitler.
Tustin had also used her phone to keep a record of Arthur's supposedly bad behaviour. But what she captured on tape exposed her own spiteful attitude towards him.
There was one incident in particular which shows just how cruel this couple were. They're seen sitting on the sofa, enjoying a McDonald's, laughing and joking together. At the same time, their little 6-year-old boy is standing up, facing the wall, not allowed to move, while they eat this food in front of him. On another occasion, it was the hottest day of the year, and outside the house, an ice cream van pulls up. And you see Arthur's dad going and buying 2 cones of ice cream. It wasn't for Arthur or any of the children. Those ice cream cones were for Thomas Hughes and his girlfriend Emma Tustin. So they sat there and ate that ice cream in front of Arthur.
This is more than just neglect. This is starvation, but with a really aggravated element to it. There's something really sadistic, isn't there, in allowing the child to watch everybody else enjoy those treats, but yet he's not allowed to have that.
The mental ordeal didn't end there. Arthur had few possessions, but there was one he valued above all.
Arthur was accused of tearing a family photo. Sort of thing that you might well have done. Little children do things like that. But to punish him, he had his Birmingham City top taken off him and cut it into little pieces as a punishment. This is a little boy, loved his football. And it just shows the lengths to which their cruelty extended.
June the 16th, 2020, and the most heartbreaking footage of all. A distressed Arthur, waking up after a night on the living room floor, too weak even to lift his bedclothes. Later that same morning, Tustin would claim this frail and emaciated boy had summoned the strength to injure himself and her. Within 24 hours, he was dead.
He's basically been treating us all like he's threw himself on the floor, he's headbutting the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
October 2021. When Tustin and Hughes went on trial at Coventry Crown Court, the jury heard the full story of Arthur's life and death at their hands. Tustin had killed him by banging his head against a hard surface repeatedly. But the post-mortem also revealed a sustained pattern of abuse, by both her and his father.
There were broken bones or evidence of repeated beatings and physical punishment over the previous couple of months. And another thing they discovered was that he had high levels of salt in him. That could only have been administered in the form of food or drink. And it became clear that ultimately that Emma Tustin, as part of the punishment regime, had been adding salt to his food and drink. And that had helped to poison him as well, which made him even more weak, along with the starvation and everything else that was going on.
When I look at the salt poisoning, the lethal amounts of salt that she was administering to him, is this just more sadistic behaviour? Well, I don't think it is. I think that she intended to kill him with salt because it would be easier for her to explain away as a medical condition rather than what it really is, which is a violent act, a violent abusive act.
The jury rejected the pair's pleas of innocence. Tustin, who delivered the fatal blow, was convicted of murder and jailed for life with a minimum of 29 years. Hughes, who encouraged the abuse, was found guilty of manslaughter and jailed for a minimum of 21 years. The judge said he'd allowed his love for his son to be obliterated by his infatuation with Tustin.
Looking back at Arthur's short life, he never really stood a chance. As soon as that relationship started between his father and Tustin, his fate was sealed, really. But Hughes, he's not innocent in this, not by a long stretch. When you look at the kind of language that he used, he actively encouraged Tustin. So he's just as sadistic and nasty himself. He didn't strike the fatal blow, but to my mind, he's just as responsible.
So this is from my daughter Olivia Lambinjo-Hughes, Arthur's mom. Following the verdict of my son's trial, I'd like to take this opportunity to focus on the life Arthur lived and to celebrate the little beautiful boy I knew and loved deeply. The details of Arthur's case are harrowing and incomparable, but I want people to know who Arthur was, from his huge smile and personality to his gentle and caring nature. All mothers are biased, and I believe that their children are the best, and I'm no different. Arthur was the light of my life. He wasn't just my only child, he was my best friend. Never did I imagine he would have been taken from this world so early in his life.
How could two adults subject a 6-year-old child to such sustained torment and torture?
We've evolved as parents to care for our children. I'd die for my children. Most people would do. But to stand by and let your child be mistreated and die, how can a father do that? Tustin, she's a stepmom who reveals, even talking about this makes me emotional. But the rationalisation of the bad behaviour is a poor defence. And it's just heartbreaking to see parents who can let that happen.